welcome to this session. Today, we're going to discuss the differences between food safety and GAP certifications and the Food Safety and Modernization Act Produce Safety Rule. My name is Elena Rogers, and I am an area specialized agent working in food safety with produce with NC State University. During this session, we will discuss the following items, and we'll try to set comparisons between these two different programs. So let's talk about the general programs. First of all, let's start with food safety and GAP certifications. These have been happening for the last 20 years in the industry. They are often required by buyers. So if a farm wants to do business with a specific buyer, they have to then seek to get GAP certified. And how do they do this? They do this by hiring a third-party audit company that will come in and basically verify that their food safety program is in place and that it is being followed. Some of these audits can be very simple and some can be quite complex. It just depends on the company and the scheme that is being used. On the other hand, FSMA's Produce Safety Rule is a government regulation. It was passed by Congress in 2011. We were able to see the content of the rule as it pertains to farms in 2015. And in 2019, farm inspections started in North Carolina at covered farms. In a minute, we will talk about covered farms. The practices outlined in the rule were developed by FDA, and inspections are conducted by either FDA or the state departments of agriculture. Here in North Carolina, the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services has a produce safety office that has inspectors that are now conducting these inspections. So any farm can be audited and be GAP certified as long as the farm requests the service and pays for it and undergoes the process successfully. As we look at FSMA's produce safety rule, under this process, this is not necessarily a voluntary process. Under this, there are three different types of categories of farms. Farms can be either not covered, they can be eligible for a qualified exemption and modified requirements, or they can be covered farms, farms that are inspected regularly. These farms that are covered farms are farms that often in the rule, it says that they sell more than $500,000 in food sales, and that most of the food they sell is sold to qualified end users. In order to make this process simpler and figure out where you fit as a farm, we have developed a template so that you can figure out where you fall under the produce safety rule. All you will need is your produce sales for the last 3 years. You will need to know your food sales for the last 3 years, and you will need to know who you sold that food to. You can go to our website, NC Fresh Produce Safety, and in the left-hand column, you can go to the FSMA tab or Food Safety Modernization Act. When you click on there, there will be a menu that will pop up. And one of the options is going to be this template that you can then download or follow and do the math and work through it. And that way you can know exactly where your farm falls. If you have any questions, please contact one of our team members. Now, let's talk about on audits, okay? And audits and inspections are not the same. So let's talk about audits for a minute. So basically, the farm is requesting a company to send an auditor that is going to perform an audit to make sure that the farm is following all the requirements, okay? The farm is paying for this audit. Usually some of these audits can be maybe in the $750 to about thousands of dollars for one audit. They are based on hourly charges. The auditor's travel time, the time they spend at the farm, and the time it takes them to put together their reports. And during this process, it is a time when the farm is going to basically show the auditor their food safety plan. The auditor can check if the practices that are actually outlined in that food safety plan are being followed by the employees, by the farm in general, and to see if there are any major food safety risks that are not being addressed. Plus, they could also include any buyer requirements, again, that the buyer might have for that type of commodity or that type of operation. If a farm sells to different buyers, it may require multiple audits if the buyers don't accept the same types of audits. Now, let's talk about FSMA's produce safety rule. So, we said that NCDA, or the North Carolina Department of Ag, has a produce safety office and they conduct announced inspections in North Carolina. You can expect, if you are a produce farmer and your farm is a covered farm, you can expect to get a phone call at any time during the growing season, and an inspector will call you and they will set up a time to come visit your farm. Even though we know that the frequency of inspections has not been published, we could say that confidently that if a farm follows all the practices and has all the paperwork in line, they probably won't get inspected more than once a year. There is no cost for these regular inspections, and as long again as the farm is in compliance, they probably won't see an inspector more than once a year. Now, let's talk about what produce can be audited and certified. So, any fresh fruits and vegetables, including mushrooms, can be audited and they can be GAP certified as long as the farm completes the process successfully. On the other hand, FSMA's produce safety rule looks at produce from a different standpoint. Produce can fall into one of three categories. The first one is covered produce. This would include fresh fruits and vegetables. FDA calls them raw agricultural commodities. Almost all produce that is grown will fall under this category, and if it is grown at a covered farm, it will be inspected. The second category is produce that falls under the not covered list, and this is produce under the rarely consumed raw list. In a minute, we will see a slide with the 32 commodities that are currently included in this list. This list is being revised as of winter 2021, and we expect FDA to possibly add some commodities. And the interesting thing about these is that they are not going to be subject to regular inspections. The third category is for produce that will receive commercial processing that adequately reduces microorganisms that could make someone sick. So here's the list of produce that is not covered by the produce safety rule because it is rarely consumed raw. And this list is being revised as of winter 2021. And we expect some additions in the next couple months when FDA releases their final guidelines. But for now, if you're growing any of these commodities are not inspected. Here are examples of food that was commercially processed and that had a kill step while that was happening. And so, for what this means for a grower is that the apples that went into that apple juice or onto that baby food could be potentially exempt from inspection if the farm can comply with the requirements set for produce that will be further processed. Now, let's talk about what is covered when you either have a food safety audit or you are subject to an inspection on the produce safety rule. So, on the food safety and GAP certifications, the questions vary because, again, there are so many different types of audits. But usually, these are based on good agricultural practices for field operations, good manufacturing practices for packing houses and packing areas, holding areas, and it can also include pesticide, fertilizer, a revision of where the farm stands with compliance with local and state laws. There is a wide range of topics that can be covered. Some of these audits focus on growing and harvest activities, while others cover all operations at a farm and may even require a hazard plan. So, again, it just depends on what type of audit you are doing. On the other hand, FSMA's produce safety rule focuses on 6 areas, and these 6 areas are outlined here: health and hygiene, soil amendments, water, domesticated animals and wildlife, harvest practices, and equipment, tools, and buildings. All the questions that an inspector will ask are based on these 6 topic areas. Now, one area that is common to both the produce safety rule and GAP certifications is employee health and hygiene. It is critical for the safety of produce. And so you will find that a lot of the requirements are very similar for these 2 sections. If you have been undergoing GAP certifications, you are probably meeting a lot of the requirements that are in the produce safety rule. Now, let's talk about training requirements for a minute, and this is from the standpoint of supervisors. Under food safety and GAP certifications, food safety supervisor or coordinator has to attend an annual training of some sort and has to have proof of that for audit day. So these trainings can be done through extension, they can be done through private industry, through trade associations. This person has to have some kind of training before audit day. As we look at employees, so these could include harvesters, packing line workers, all these have to be trained annually and as often as needed. Some audit guidelines require that employees be trained annually, while others require that they be trained monthly. Again, it just depends on the type of audit you are doing. So under FSMA's produce safety rule, a supervisor, owner, or responsible party must attend the Produce Safety Alliance training once if they operate a covered farm. We recommend that anyone, regardless of the size of operation, even if you're a farm that is not covered by the rule or is a farm that is qualified exempt, we strongly encourage you to attend a Produce Safety Alliance training. This is a one-day training where we discuss the practices and why they are important and why they help ensure that our food is hopefully safe and that the produce that you are selling will not be the source of foodborne illness. There are some supervisor qualifications in the produce safety rule, meaning that whoever is making decisions at the farm has to be qualified either through education, experience, or training to do so. Also, employees are to be trained at least once annually. Let's now talk about records and record keeping. So records must be available for review under both programs, and they should be accessible, but they should also be in a safe place. All the documents that are generated as part of your GAP certification process are legally binding. So keep that in mind as you are putting them together. Always use a pen and not a pencil to fill out forms and records. And you can keep them whether it's in writing or you can keep them electronically. In the event of an investigation or an outbreak, documents are very important. There is a saying in the industry that if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. Now let's look at FSMA's produce safety rule. A farm has about 24 hours to provide records to the FDA or the Department of Agriculture or the Department of Health in the event that they are investigating your farm for any kind of problem or investigating an outbreak. Under the produce safety rule, there are specific guidelines for records that all farms can follow, but they also allow you to use the same records that are allowed for a food safety and GAP certification, as long as you have added any information required on these specific guidelines. There is usually substantial record keeping with food safety and GAP certifications, even for some of the simpler audits. So keep that in mind as you are working through it and realize that it will take probably a lot longer to get ready and set up a program for a food safety audit. The farm develops a plan and this plan is audited. So the plan is usually a reflection of practices that you are planning to follow in your farm, not what other farms are doing. And just realize that the auditor on that audit day is looking at that plan closely, and they are also looking at any guidelines that might be in the audit scheme that you selected or that your buyer selected, and looking at how are you complying with them. As we look at produce safety rule, the number of written records required is not substantial, aside from the water portion that at this moment is on hold. There are only about 6 or 7 written documents that you are required to have as a covered farm. It is up to the farm to keep additional records to verify that practices are being conducted in a satisfactory manner. And then just realize that a food safety plan is not required under FSMA's produce safety rule. The inspector will check to see how you as a farm are complying with the practices outlined in the rule, but they will not be looking at the food safety plan. We hope this session has been helpful for you. If you need additional information, please visit our website and see Fresh Produce Safety. Thank you.